I'm Hannah.
And I'm Matt Hannah.
And this is Horror Hour with the Hannahs.
Where we do scary movies.
Sure. In the wise words of Bodies, 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 today's episode is a podcast about hanging out with your smartest and funniest friend. So today we have a special guest, Olivia, who runs the Bookstagram No Shelf Control. That is no__shelf control on Instagram. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
We are very excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
We are going to be talking about Silence of the Lambs today. So we are going to be talking both about the book and the film.
Which is why we brought Olivia on.
Yeah, we needed
as
a
the
content
resident
expert.
book person.
She's also a teacher. And tell us what subject you teach.
Yeah, I teach 10th grade English literature and 11th grade AP language and composition.
So she's for real the perfect guest when talking about a book. We do have some content warnings in this episode, including sexual assault and discussions of the transphobia that exists in both the novel and the film. So, Matt and I had seen this movie before.
Yeah, I'd seen this when I was pretty young. This is like
I probably
a
saw
growing
when I was
up
like
movie.
12, which is maybe too young.
This was my first time watching it and reading it. You said I was the perfect guest, and I feel like I'm an objectively bad guest because I don't watch horror movies.
You were good for the book part.
Valid,
No, but
I'll take that.
From a teaching standpoint, movies are obviously literature, right?
That's true. Film the text.
Yeah,
here we
go. That's big for us. I'll be excited to get your perspective on it.
Thanks.
Maybe we can talk about my problems with the way Shakespeare's taught in school.
Oh, yeah. I have plenty.
Which I had a big rant on in another episode.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about that after the episode ends. Who's to say?
Not that it should be taught in school. I'm saying I don't like the way it's taught because it makes kids hate Shakespeare. But I digress. Okay.
I had also not read the book before, but I had certainly seen the movie several times. Probably every 3 or 4 years.
That's how I felt too. And I mean, I'll get right into it and say that I think this movie is awesome. It's the best way to describe it. And I think I forget every time I watch it how good it is. And then you get that rewatch and you once again are like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah, this movie deserved the Oscars it won.
I think especially for the acting performances, those Oscars were very deserved. But I do have some criticisms, at least that I have from this watch through, that I hadn't previously thought through, but we'll get into that. Silence of the Lambs is a 1991 film directed by Jonathan Demme and written by Ted Talley, adapted from Thomas Harris's 1988 novel of the same name. It's starring Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, and Ted Levine. It was released, funnily enough, on Valentine's Day.
Romantic.
In 1991. We love brutal murder and assault of women for a holiday.
Great date night movie.
Be mine.
Yeah. And it grossed $272 million on a budget of only $19 million, which made it the fifth highest grossing film of that year. Which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, big for horror.
And also impressive for a rated R film in general, I feel like. So, like we said, it had a big sweep at the Oscars. It's one of only 3 films to ever land a big sweep, having won awards for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, and Best Director. It's also won Best Picture, and it is the only Oscar-nominated horror movie to ever win Best Picture.
And so it wins 5 awards and Best Picture.
5
including.
Best
Excuse
Picture.
me. Yes.
Yes.
Which it takes that much rewards to just win your Best Picture, right? No one else has been close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also has been included in several 100 Years AFI lists for number 65 on the list of 100 movies, number 5 on the list of 100 thrills. It's also on both the 100 Heroes and Villains list, with Hannibal Lecter being the number 1 villain on their list. It's also on the list of 100 movie quotes, with Hannibal Lecter's line saying, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." And they did a 10th anniversary 100 movies edition, and it was number 74. So this movie continues to be discussed and praised.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I do think it's a shame that nothing after this, no horror movies after this have seen the same, like, Oscar buzz.
I will say, like, right off the bat, there are horror movies that I like more than this that I do think are equally as deserving of Oscar praise that
That's
have
what I was saying
not
before,
gotten
though.
it.
The only way you're going to win Best Picture as a horror movie is if you also win director, actor, actress,
Yeah.
and screenplay.
But even
It's
then,
absurd.
like,
You have to do that much work.
I know, Olivia, you haven't. I'm gonna guess you have not seen Hereditary.
Sure, have not.
And the, like, lead performance is, I would say, like, pretty on par. It's a very, very different character, but in terms of, like, talent needed, it's pretty on par with what I'd say Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster are doing in this, and nothing.
I can do an hour discussion on why Toni Collette should have at least been nominated for that Oscar. So
I feel like, and this is a super uneducated question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I feel like, though, this, like, brand of horror is not as popular anymore. Like, this, like, deep storytelling and psych dive into two characters, I feel like anymore, so much horror that I see advertised is advertised based on the extent to which you can jump scare it,
Yeah.
to how much you can turn it into, like, some type of joke or meme or trend. Like, it just doesn't, based off of the limited things that I see, it doesn't feel as, like, mentally engaging as this did.
Yeah.
sorry, you want to go first, Anna?
I would definitely agree that I think in advertising, that's certainly the case. Because a lot of times, like, obviously, they just want to make it, they want to get you to the theater, so they're just trying to excite you to get you there.
Mhm.
So I have noticed that as well. I also think a lot of the movies that make a lot of money, therefore you will hear about them more, tend to be more of, like, the Blumhouse, James Wan, Conjuring, Insidious, jumpy haunted house movies. But I would say, like, A24, for example, as a production company, they're not always the biggest money makers, and they do have, like, a lot of horror that have flown under the radar compared to, like we said, some of the big, like, Blumhouse movies, but they are definitely much more thought-provoking, and that is, like, my favorite is the elevated horror subgenre.
Okay.
Which is a douchey
I know, I don't like that term,
Matt
but
hates it. But that is just the kind of films I tend to like because I do think they are more thought-provoking.
I'm going to sum up with what you said. It's survivor's bias. This movie is seen more because it's so famous. There were plenty of schlocky things coming around at the same time. There are the diamonds in the rough with everything, and I don't actually think it's probably changed that much. I would also say beyond A24, I think Jordan Peele has made 3 movies that
You know what? That's valid.
are on this level.
That's so valid.
All 3 of them, I'll say, are on this level. But I think it's like, yeah, it's what you're seeing. It's because you didn't live at that time. That stuff was probably all there as well.
And I think it makes sense that I'm only going to see what's most heavily advertised because I'm not investing the time into looking for the good stuff, which is on me.
And that's always going to be like the big production companies that have money to advertise.
Right.
Talk to Me was really good too. That was A24, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But no, there's stuff out there. You just have to find it.
Yeah. Valid.
I feel like
Where
we
we
could
at?
probably find a horror that you would actually like and not feel totally hating.
Yeah, I mean, like, Nope, I think is like one of the most complex isn't the right word, but like Nope is on another level in terms of storytelling and like thematic elements going on in it. We'll have to talk about it at some point, but
Oh, we certainly will.
that movie, like there are people that are like calling that one of the like greatest movies of the past 20 years,
And
like
then-
outside of just horror.
But
so.
I've also seen people say it's the worst of Jordan Peele's
Well, those
3,
people are
so,
idiots.
you know, whatever. To each their
No,
own.
I think it's the best of the 3. I'll go out and say that. But
I'm not going to say it's the best, but I'm not going to say it's the worst of the 3.
we'll see. I'm excited for the 4th one, whatever it is.
True. Okay, so let's get into our 15-second summaries.
I'm not ready. I'm not going first on this one.
Yes, you are.
What? I had to go first.
Yeah.
No,
Go.
I'm not ready at all. Man makes a skin suit. That's all I got.
Sure. Okay.
I had nothing funny to say.
I can go next. We'll let Liv have
Okay, you
a
ready?
sec. Yeah.
Go.
Hannibal Lecter has the gift of the gab and uses that to murder people. And that is where I think the heart of this movie is. I don't know.
There's actually so much going on. It's
There's no
impossible.
way.
There's
So
a lot
many
of stories.
storylines.
Which is what is good. I guess that's very the novel portion of it is like you can really get away with a lot of storylines compared to most movies. So they did a good job adapting, to be honest. So I haven't read it, but I assume.
I also I think the Hannibal storyline is the most interesting.
Agree.
So that's where my brain's at. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Go.
Investigator in training gets placed on a murder case that she is independently ill-equipped to deal with.
Nice.
You think she's ill-equipped?
I do.
Interesting.
I do.
Oh, okay. I wonder I need to know what the book says because I come across with the opposite idea about it.
Sorry.
I was gonna say she certainly couldn't have done it alone. That's why, she does need the information from Hannibal. She doesn't make those inferences independently, but no one does. It's not just her that's failing to get there.
Yeah, and the ill-equipped isn't a dig on her. Anybody placed on that case would have been ill-equipped to deal with it because
I agree with that.
Lecter had all the keys to the, know.
I find that everyone in the FBI is ill-equipped, and I kind of find this movie to make the FBI look bad, but I also think that's probably how the FBI actually is. So
it's actually really funny because Jodie Foster was worried that the movie made the FBI look bad.
I read that as well, and she thought she was
like-
going to get death threats or something.
I don't think she was worried about how the final product looked, but was worried in the making that they would do that.
Well, I think this
still
movie
think it kind of does.
This movie does make the FBI look dumb.
I
But
mean,
my question is, I think this might be actually what they look like internally. So maybe this is just how they look.
I don't work for the FBI, so I don't know. But as we said, this is based on a 1988 novel by Thomas Harris. So I think when understanding the book and the movie, it's important to think about the historical significance of when this was coming out. So in the 1970s is when we started doing the criminal personality profiling on serial killers. And Harris was actually doing research himself, was part of the criminal profiling. So he had some information that I think then motivated him to write the book. One of the criminals that was profiled was Ted Bundy, and it helped them solve the Green River Killer case. Additionally, Bundy had told them not to remove a body when they discovered it because the killer would go back to it, which was something that they later confirmed to have happened in that case, I believe. And that is also, I think that comes up in this as well. Bundy also was famous for faking injuries to lure victims, which we see from Buffalo Bill in the novel and the movie. Another killer from the 50s was Ed Gein. He gathered widespread notoriety after authorities discovered that he had exhumed corpses from local graveyards and fashioned keepsakes from their bones and skin. He later also admitted to killing 2 women. Soon after his mother's death, Gein had began to create a woman's suit so that he could, quote, become his mother to literally crawl into her skin. He did deny having sex with the bodies he exhumed, explaining that they smelled too bad. So you can very much see how killers like Bundy, Ed Gein, and then also just the criminal profiling at the time very heavily inspired this novel.
For sure. And Buffalo Bill is definitely based off at least those 2 men.
I was also reading, and I can't remember what killer, and I don't know if they were just a murderer or a serial murderer who had kept women in a well in their basement. So that also seems to have been pulled from real life as well. Mm-hmm. Matt did not read this book. Only Liv and I did.
Yeah. I was not asked to, though. I'm supposed to.
You could have.
Oh, I didn't know I was allowed. I don't
Why would you
read.
not be allowed? Yeah, you don't know how to read. That's the problem. So, I did want to get into a little bit of, like, thoughts on the book.
Let's chat.
Did you like it?
No.
What about it did you not like?
It felt, so like, I feel like I'm actually stealing your words. Like, you said this to me earlier today, but none of the characters were compelling. I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel invested. The reading felt very, what's the word that I'm looking for? The reading felt very static. Like, it just felt like we were moving on from, like, one fact to the next, to the next, to the next. And, like, thematically, there wasn't a lot left to the imagination. And maybe that's my fault for watching the movie before I read the book. Like, I knew what was coming next, but the text itself just felt very dry to me.
I agree. I have read textbooks that were more interesting than this in terms of writing style. And again, I had also seen the movie before I read the book, so that doesn't help, especially when there are changes, but enough of it is very, very similar. To the point where I was like, well, I know what happens. Like, why am I reading through this when I am not interested? So it took me a very long time to finish. I think the plot is interesting, but the writing just did not keep me engaged at all. And had I not been reading it for the podcast, I don't think I would have finished.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that it's so acclaimed. And
Yeah.
there are multiple in the series. Like,
Oh, I didn't realize that there was a series.
this is the sequel
To what?
Red Dragon.
Red Dragon, then this, and then I think it's Hannibal.
And then Hannibal Rising.
I don't know if Hannibal Rising is a book. I can't remember.
It's a show, or it's a movie.
Yeah, it is.
So this makes me have to ask, is this one of the rare movie adaptations that's better than the book?
I would say yes.
I would also say yes.
There you
And
go.
I didn't even necessarily like the movie, but again, like, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. I'm not a horror girly, but, like, I was so much more compelled by the movie than I was the text. And I don't know, like, one scene that stands out to me is when, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on her name? Jodie Foster.
Clarice.
Duh. Hello, Clarice. But when Clarice is, looking in that old garage, that old storage unit, when that was happening in the book, even though I had already seen the movie, I couldn't really picture what was, like, going on around her in the storage unit. That was kind of, like, difficult for me to visualize. And seeing that in the movie, like, having those visual cues was a lot more helpful to, like, understanding how she was conducting her investigation.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. Was there anything about the book that isn't also replicated in the movie that you really liked?
Yeah, I thought, and this was helpful for me because I'm, like, not super educated on the act of sewing. But, like, what was helpful for me was towards the end of the novel, one of the investigators comes to this conclusion that Buffalo Bill is cutting out triangles in the skin to take out his skin suit and, like, make it larger. And in the film, we get those visuals of, like, the diamonds and the triangles cut into the cloth, but there's not really a clear explanation. And if you don't have that background information, you won't necessarily make the connection yourself. But almost like painting him as an artist in the book, if there was one thing that compelled me to a character, it was that. Because it's like, wow, what is really going on in this guy's mind?
Yeah, it definitely humanizes him a bit more in the book. Like, yes, he is murdering people, so not good, but there's obviously a lot more complexity that exists to a person, and we don't get that at all in the movie. And if anything, in the movie, he's just like a caricature of a person, not an actual human being. And in the book, we do get sections from his perspective, and I think that context is helpful.
Agree.
Were there any themes in the book that you don't feel are present in the movie? Because I think we can kind of talk about all the themes in one go. I'm just wondering if I'm, like,
I don't
missing
think so.
anything.
Do you think I am?
I don't think so either. And we'll very much get into the themes later. There's a lot to say about gender, and I think there's also a lot to say about class, but I see them both represented in the film
Yes.
not just in the book. So in that regard, I think it's also a great adaptation. Matt, do you have questions?
No. I wanted to ask, though, before we get to talking about the movie, I want to do the plot description. So, but if you...
We're not done talking about the book.
Perfect.
So, one thing that we did want to cover, and this is both in the book and the film, but I'd say it's even more so present in the book, which is why I'm bringing it up now, is that there are several instances where multiple characters confirm that Buffalo Bill is not transgender. Lecter literally explains that he isn't actually transgender and identifying as female. He just wants to be something other than himself, like somebody else. But we are still seeing in both the text and the film that he is killing women to be a woman, to make a skin suit of a woman. So it's hard to entirely separate him from transness. There's scenes in the book that aren't in the movie, that he won't touch his genitalia and uses a mop, the head of a mop, to tuck his genitalia. The book also mentions that he's on hormones. So even if the author and screenwriter director have said that he wasn't meant to be read as trans, he is very heavily coded to be. And regardless of the film's and writer's intentions, it still becomes, unfortunately, like it's trying to be representative of trans identities, and that is just not fair.
Yeah, I think the intent was definitely like not to, but the actual outcome was that it is, I would say, harmful towards trans people because of the representation of them in this film and book. And I do think that it's like a tough thing because, like I said, the intent is definitely not that, but that intent is different from the actual consequence. I still think like this movie is good, but that is kind of just like an unfortunate thing that happens and it should be like talked about. And I think it's a very valid critique of both the film and the book.
And by having such a major piece of media that is utilizing these stereotypes about transgender people being violent or predators, that is further villainizing a group of people that are already discriminated against enough and puts them at even more risk of real life violence.
It also feels like they try to like skirt that by having Jodie Foster say like, well, no, like it's trans people are not typically violent. They're docile, I think is how she describes them. And it's like you tried your best to, make it so that you weren't harming anybody, but it's still,
that
it just doesn't fully work. Yeah,
I mean, ultimately you can't have this plot and it not come across that way.
I think that statement from Jodie Foster, from Clarice, saying that trans people are typically docile, her words, right? But like, I think that gets overshadowed by the actual actions of Buffalo Bill themselves. And especially when you set this novel and the movie against the background of the AIDS epidemic, which starts to come to a head in the early 80s, it's hard to separate this from the consequence that all it really does is fan the flames of straight people's fear of queer people.
Yeah, I agree. I think the consensus I come to on it, though, is that it's like it's a very valid critique and you can hate the movie because of that, but I also think it's still okay to like this movie, right? And I think it's still okay to like the book. Right.
And I mean, you could say that about a lot of things. Like, as long as you have to come at most things with a critical mindset. Like, there are books by authors that I like that the author is problematic. And because I know that, I can kind of read the text and understand how their potentially problematic views have impacted the text. But it doesn't mean that the book itself is entirely bad. That's just not the world is shaped.
And I don't think anyone's bad for liking this movie or enjoying it, because I am someone that, like I said, very much enjoys this movie. But I am like aware of that, and I think it's like a very fine critique, and I understand why it's a problem.
I think it's also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's also helpful for the conversation itself. Like, again, my inexperience with horror coming into play. But up until now, when I've heard about Silence of the Lambs, or I've heard people reference Silence of the Lambs, most of the commentary is about Lecter as a villain, and I haven't heard about the transphobia aspect. So even just to have that background information and then to be able to engage in the discourse, knowing what we know now and having the language tools that we have now, I think is helpful.
Agreed.
And ultimately, we were saying this before we started recording. It just kind of feels like there clearly, okay, we can't say clearly because we're not in these people's heads, but they have said in interviews that they were intentional about including lines that were like, he's not transgender. But the intent versus the final product are different.
I think it has the same impact as when, like, back in the day, people still say it now, but when people thought it was a helpful thing to say, like, oh, I'm colorblind, like, to erase erase in quotation marks, the negative in quotation marks connotation of race or sexuality is to make the situation better. But, and that's what they're doing here, right? By saying that, like, oh, well, he's not trans. He's actually okay. Like, that doesn't make it.
That doesn't
make it better at all.
I had a friend of mine say that his dad's trying to, like, navigate all of this stuff, and at one point said, I don't see gender. I was like, oh, he's trying.
So
like,
close.
He's trying.
So far.
It really made me laugh. So that's kind of what they were trying to say in this, I think, as well. Is they're like, yeah. So it just, their grandpa's trying, but not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about the movie? You have more things to say about the book?
Let's get into it.
Can I do the plot description?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're going to do my plot description speed read, everyone's new favorite
bit.
Yeah, bit of the episode. So
You should
start timing to see how fast I can read these descriptions I wrote. All right, are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay. Clarice Starling, an FBI trainee, is assigned by her boss, Jack Crawford, to interview the incarcerate Hannibal Lecter. And a highly intelligent former psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer, Crawford secretly hopes to get insights into a psychopathic serial killer known as Buffalo Bill, who kills overweight women and skins them. Clarice meets Lecter in his cell at the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane. Although initially courteous, Lecter rebuffs her, deducing Crawford's true motive. As she is leaving, another prisoner, Miggs, flings his semen at her, angering Lecter, who changes his mind and provides a clue. The clue leads to a jar holding a man's severed head. The man is linked to Buffalo Bill, and Lecter offers to provide the killer on the condition that he is transferred away from Dr. Frederick Chilton, who he detests. Meanwhile, Lecter influences Miggs into committing suicide, presumably to avenge his revolting action towards Starling. Another Buffalo Bill victim is found, with a death's head moth lodged in her throat. In Tennessee, Buffalo Bill abducts Catherine Martin, the daughter of a U.S. senator. Crawford authorizes Starling to offer Lecter a fake deal, promising a prison transfer if he helps to capture Buffalo Bill in time to rescue Catherine. Instead, Lecter demands a quid pro quo, offering clues in exchange for personal information about Clarice. She agrees. Chilton exposes Crawford's deceit and offers Lecter a new deal. Lecter agrees and is flown to Memphis, where he gives Senator Martin accurate information on Buffalo Bill's appearance, but falsely identifies him as Lewis' friend. Clarice figures out that the name is an anagram of iron sulfide, aka fool's gold. She visits Lecter, now in prison in Tennessee. She describes a traumatic childhood incident where she heard lambs screaming in line for the slaughter, and she fails to save them. Lecter speculates that she hopes saving Catherine will end the recurring nightmares she has from the event. Satisfied, he returns the case files to her. That evening, Lecter brutally kills his 2 guards and escapes from the cell. With notes from Lecter, Starling figures out that Buffalo Bill knew his first victim, Frederica Bimmel. She travels to Bimmel's Ohio hometown and discovers that she and Buffalo Bill were both tailors. In Bimmel's room, she finds evidence that reveals Buffalo Bill is making a suit with women's skin. The culprit is a man named James Gum, who is making this suit to wear. Crawford and FBI hostage rescue team storm Gum's address in Illinois, but find the house empty. Meanwhile, Starling follows a lead that takes her to the house of Bimmel's former client. There, she meets the real James Gum, realizing that he is Buffalo Bill after spotting a death's head moth. She pursues him and finds Catherine trapped in a dry well in the cavernous basement. Gum stalks Starling with night vision goggles, but reveals himself by cocking his revolver. She reacts quickly and shoots him dead. At the FBI Academy graduation party, Starling receives a phone call from Lecter, who is in the Bahamas at an airport. He assures her that he has no intention of pursuing her and requests that she return the favor, which she says she cannot. He hangs up, stating that he is having an old friend for dinner as he trails a newly arrived Chilton into the crowd. And then the credits roll over the crowd.
That is, I will say, the very ending is so much stronger than the end of the book, where he says he's having an old friend for dinner.
Yeah.
That shit slaps, and it is not in the book.
I cracked up. I
It's
knew
so
it was
good.
coming because everyone knows that line. And I still cracked up.
Can I also say this was hard to read? I did not realize how many, like, weird names there were. Like, I don't know, there are a lot of L's and I couldn't get them
It's
out.
called preparation.
I do preparation. It's still hard. I read it.
Well, Liv, did you scream at all while watching this movie?
I did not scream. I did walk away.
Oh, what scene? That's
Full hide.
I literally left the room during the scene. I wrote it down. When Catherine is driving to our apartment and the song is playing and she's like jamming out in her car and like Bill is like casing her and like that fear just like hit too close to home. Like that was too real. Like I think any woman can appreciate that feeling of feeling like you're not safe or someone's just around the corner from you. And that is not, as a viewer, that's not engaging for me. That's just like life. And I don't like that.
That one is very real and also is exactly what like Ted Bundy did. So that
Right.
makes it even like scarier.
The violence against women in this movie really does hit home.
Yeah. That's literally what I wrote down. I said, fear just hit too close to home. And then I proceeded to say, why did the cat have to watch? That was the hardest part. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Also, Princess the dog. Ugh.
Free princess.
Hey,
free
princess.
my man's princess.
Princess got freed. Did you have any hides or screams? I can't remember.
The Hannah hide count was a 0, and the Hannah scream count was a 0. But I've also seen this movie several times before.
I was going to say, there were a lot of scenes that had me like, I like them, but they're scary. I mean, that whole in preparation when Hannibal's in the cell before killing the 2 guards is scary. Like, you know it's coming because they show you. He's picking the lock. It's your dramatic irony, right? The audience knows. And then, boom. like,
Yeah, I guess it's because I had seen it before. Like, I've seen this many times, so I wasn't, like, I knew what was going to happen. So I was like, okay.
Great practicals there, though. With the blood and the him just biting that dude's face. Like,
Skin face.
That didn't bother me as much. Because I think it was just like random violence. Like it wasn't like gender violence.
okay.
I don't want to see it ever again. Like I never want to see somebody eat another's face again.
Yeah.
But it didn't bother me as much. I could sit through it.
Yeah, I think it's you saying that. It's so interesting. Like, I really enjoy horror movies, and talking to somebody who doesn't enjoy them, it's like, oh, I want to see it again because that like it was very much practical effect, and it like cut deep. Like I like actually made it
was
made
effective.
my brain. It was effective, right? It made my brain think about like what that would be like, and I was like, that's awesome. Like that's crazy. This movie can give me that feeling. I have to see it again, and you're the opposite. You're like, no, thank you. I don't need to feel that way.
That's plenty.
I did the same thing with Dawn of the Dead. We talked about that. Like the practicals there are like they made me yell. like
Yeah. I feel a lot like that way with a lot of body horror, like Live. I mean, where like I see it and I'm like, no, I'm very good. I don't need to watch that
is
ever
that even
again.
body horror though? It's more up here. It's up.
I
Sorry.
said
Oh, sorry.
that's
Body
how I
horror in general.
feel
My bad.
with body horror.
Understood.
With this, didn't really face me that
Interesting.
badly.
I'm not definitely the opposite. Seeing it is like I like it looking a little fake, like with practicals, and I like it not always being shown. It like lets my brain do the work.
What I was gonna say was a strength that I think this movie has is that a lot of shots they'll talk about something really gruesome and we don't see it. The warden, before Clarice even goes in to meet Lecter, the warden shows her a photo of what Hannibal did to a nurse previously. And, like, it's clearly horrifying, but we don't get to see it, which very much keeps the mystery. Later, when they're doing the autopsy, eventually we do see shots of the body. But for the first couple minutes, we don't, or like we only see like a very small piece, which I also, it has the impact of sometimes making it more scary because it's up to the imagination, but I like that like they're not making me look at that.
I agree.
I think it's effective.
I think the autopsy scene is like so effective, and I'll just talk about things I like, right? Like with filmmaking here is showing Clarice's reaction to the autopsy. And I especially think it's potent because it is crimes against women being only investigated by men and one woman. So to show the woman's reaction to it is like very different, especially because they had like 40 cops standing in the room with the body. You don't even know the body's there in that first shot. Also very poignant, like to have them like being a bunch of idiots running around this woman's body and then getting kicked out. And then you have this like very intimate scene with her in the body that is effective thematically and in a scary way.
And I like, too, there are certain details that only she notices about this woman and her body and her experience. Like, there's inferences that she can make because she knows nail polish in a way that other, like, the men in the room aren't noticing.
Right.
What her nail polish looks like, and if it's chipped, like, how long ago it was done, and what kind of polish was used, and if that would be popular in this area versus another area. So where did the body come from? There's a lot of inferences she's also able to make because of her class, like that background that she came from throughout both the movie
Was your daddy
and
a
the
coal
novel.
miner? Yeah. I think this is one of those movies that is firing on all cylinders in terms of like using its framework and its story to push the themes forward, but also be scary, where like I think the themes are very much about like womanhood and this woman in a man's world. And I think that's really cool. Really, everything comes together to really, I think, service that main theme. So, are there things you did like about it, Olivia?
The things I liked, Anthony Hopkins.
Incredible.
I don't think anyone else could have done that role.
Yeah.
He's so good.
I mean, that's why he's number one on that villains list. If we can even call him a villain in this movie. Like, he's a bad guy, but he's not the antagonist of this movie.
But, like, even the way... The way that he conducts his role, but also the way the directors chose to frame him. Like, whenever he is revealing information about Buffalo Bill... like, light is on his face in this almost, like, angelic way that makes him, like, so sympathetic that when I got to the end and saw that he was very much still in his villainous ways, like, I wanted to know what happened to him. Like, I cared at the end of the movie about what happened to Hannibal Lecter.
Yes. It's because he, like, takes care of Clarice, and there is almost, like... Right. And there are two almost, like... father figures to Clarice, which is Jack and Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
But both of them also have like a kind of, it's played that maybe they're both into her also, which is pretty gross. But you're like, what? He like helped her out. He cared about her. So you're like, you're interested. Also, I think this plays into it that Anthony Hopkins is handsome. Like he, in my opinion, like he's.
I didn't get that.
I was not getting that.
I feel like he was
kind of gross.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe it's just me.
Mans was hissing.
Maybe it just didn't matter though because he is like
Did you see
attractive
his
man.
eyes?
Yeah, but it's like all right. Let's think about that first shot. That first shot of him. We come down. Everyone's behind bars.
You're not
when you finally
win.
get here.
No,
I just want to talk about.
Hottest.
No, not this isn't about him being hot. It's more about being the sympathetic character. Is like you got these guys that are in the criminally insane. I don't want to call it a psych ward, but that's what it is, right? And you get to him, and he's like prim and proper, standing there, like ready to meet her. And obviously, that's like he's using that. That's his like MO is to be that way. That's how he was able to get away with killing and eating people for so long. But it's just like I think that he is pretty perfect, and the way that he's like shown in the film is like what really works.
Well, he's also just like so unsettling, like the posture being so straight to the point where I felt kind of unsettled by it, or the just like looking at his eyes, like I felt like he was making really extreme eye contact with me in a way that made me they cut deep. It was really uncomfortable.
There are a lot of, that's a thing they do in this movie. A lot that I had written down was a lot of shots facing, a lot of shots where the actor was actually looking into the camera. And in some movies that doesn't work. In this one, it did work.
It works very well, especially for a character like Hannibal.
They do it with Clarice as well, especially during some of their conversations. So I complained about that in Friday the 13th, but it sucked there. It was cool here. So.
I like that it was like equalizing to have them even though he wielded all the power, right? There was this like equalizing moment where it would flash back and forth to their faces. Their faces were level with the camera every time. Their eyes were level with the camera every time. The lighting was level every time. Like, it kept them very equal, and I liked that.
I also think the lighting in this movie in general, there's not like a ton that's like glaringly like stand out, but something I thought was really cool was when they are discussing, before she goes to meet him for the first time, they're talking about that photo, whatever. While they're having that conversation, everything is lit up red. And when she walks down to see him for the first time, it's lit red. It's never lit red again. That I noticed.
Okay.
Which I think is very much, again, like villainizing him, and then you meet him, and he's just a dude, but also a scary dude.
Our form equals function that I always talk about. Right?
So I thought that was cool. And then, like you said, I think the lighting when they're having a conversation is cool. And I do think it can be kind of unsettling when there's this bright light on this guy who is being creepy. So
he is just hard not to like. It's so messed up.
Well, he's also, like, the character, you mean? Well, I think part of that is because, one, it's Anthony Hopkins, who's doing a great job. Two, he's helping our main character, and he's not being overly creepy compared to the rest of the characters.
I did have that written down, that he's the only person in the movie that treats Clarice like a human being. Like, even Jack kind of, like, patronizes her.
Yeah, and I think when Lecter does, he's kind of, like, teaching her something, or he will compliment her.
He's still like shitty to her, I would say. It just it just compared to all the other men in the film, he like actually is like almost treats her as like an equal in some ways. What I took away from it.
I wouldn't go equal, but
closer
maybe
closer than other people. All right, so there's things you liked.
There are definitely things that I like, and I can appreciate that this is a good movie. Like, I understand that other people think that this is a good movie, and I also don't think that they're wrong.
Okay.
I just hate horror.
I was going to ask, and I could probably get the answer, was, does this make you interested in further horror?
Not really. Like, okay, so you said earlier, like, I'm sure there's horror movies that we can find that you would like. And, like, challenge accepted. If you can.
We'll bring you back on. I like having people that don't like it on.
Like, I'm willing to be wrong. But as it stands right now, I still kind of, like, stand firmly. I'm
thinking Nope. That's the one I think we bring her back on for.
Have you seen Get Out?
No, I haven't. And I know that's my fault.
I think you would. One. I feel like you would like Get Out. It's not that scary, and it's also, like, I think you'll like the intent behind it as well as the filmmaking.
The reason I wanted Nope was because Get Out wears all of its like themes on its sleeve, where I think Nope is more. You almost have to like think a lot more in that one, and I was thinking English Teacher.
Yeah.
Like, so that's why I was like, oh, maybe either
English
one.
Teacher brain would like that.
Would like
Us,
Nope a lot,
but I think Us is a little more horror.
Yeah. Get Out's great. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it's easier to understand what they're saying.
I mean, people loved it.
Yeah. That's probably why, because to make the masses like something, sometimes you have to tell them exactly what you need to take away from the movie, and they still mess it up. We still got people watching Oppenheimer and thinking it's a pro-nuclear bomb movie.
Fascinating.
I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, is this a fucking joke?
Movies were a mistake. Literally. All right.
What else do you like about this movie, Matt, before we get into the poo-pooing?
I want to talk about the themes because I feel like that plays into everything that I like. But it's extremely well acted. Technically proficient is all I can say about it. I mean, there's nothing glaring that in the filmmaking that would bother you. I think it all serves its purpose. And I will be honest, I love the story. And I try not to like go too much into narrative too often, but like it's just so compelling. It's almost noir like, if you guys know what I mean. Mm-hmm. That was the thing I didn't research beforehand. This is bad research would this be considered noir? or is it like kind of flipping the noir tropes on its head? Because very often like noir films have to be men leads who are sort of morally ambiguous, where it's like Clarice is a woman and very much not morally ambiguous. Like, but I would like to do a little more deep dive, because when I did, not a lot of people have like noted that before, have talked about that idea. So maybe I'm putting it out here for the first time.
Whoa, you're so smart.
Yeah, for real.
And original. I would say, as much as there are issues that I take with this story, I think it's a really good adapted screenplay. I think it takes all of the good parts of the book, like the interesting plot points of the book, and I think it shortens and pulls together sections that didn't need to be as long. So I still think that's why it's great. You're still getting the same themes and information.
It is actually a pretty incredible screenplay. Thinking about like all the little stories they're weaving together, and you're just getting exactly what you need from all of them. And maybe that's something else I like about this. And it's like from the get-go, we're moving, right? Like she meets Hannibal within the first 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, it gets moving really fast.
You were on the move, and it really is like, that's why I was calling it noir. It's like, it's a detective story, like when it comes down to it. Just a cool genre blend of detective and horror.
I was surprised at how fast that started, with how quickly Lecter was introduced.
I'm sure that made you happy when you're getting into it, like not sure what to think, and say, oh, he's here already. Cool.
Yeah, it was a moment of like, okay, we're keeping it pushing.
Anything else for you, Hannah, that you really liked?
No, I feel like that kind of sums up the things that I really like. So let's get into stuff that we felt like maybe didn't work for us. So Liv, I'm going to let you get started with that.
Okay, I'll start with second number one. The intro. The intro felt so heavy-handed. Like, Clarice running through the forest alone in this blue-gray color scale with the fog and the signs that say hurt and agony and pain. And it's like, okay, I get it. Like, I get what we're doing here.
I love the opening, so I was really sad you said that.
I'm so sorry.
I was like, it's perfect. It's like she's in the man's world. She has to do this extra work. She's out there by herself, pulling herself up the hill. Like, love it. But I understand. Fine, it's heavy-handed. Like,
something Matt and I will talk about when we notice that things feel too heavy-handed for us. We will talk about, like, does the average viewer think that that's heavy-handed, or is it just us because we have brain cells?
I don't know. I would give you that up until the signs that say hurt, agony, and pain.
Oh, I didn't need the signs. I didn't pay attention to them. I did not realize that they existed.
I actually will say more of the pulling herself up the hill is what I thought was heavy-handed than the hurt, agony, and pain. I was like, oh, this is just dumb meathead, like, military shit, you know? But no, I think you make a good point that maybe Hannah and I are dumb viewers.
Maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
I didn't say all that.
All right, give it to me. What's next?
The scene with Miggs felt so gratuitous, right? And this is a big part of what I don't like, is like this gratuitous violence. Like how I said earlier that like that scene with Lecter and the guards, like I could sit there, I could stomach that. That's fine. Like that serves a purpose. He's breaking out of his cell and like coming in hot. But this scene with Miggs where he like assaults her while she's walking by felt really unnecessary. And I get that fuels Lecter to convince Miggs to kill himself, but also for what? Like, where does that go?
Yeah, I want to argue with you, and I don't want to keep arguing this whole time. I see it as it's another thematic thing, is it plays into the woman in a man's world thing, right? Like, I mean, it's disgusting, absolutely vile, and it like that scene may be one of the ones that does make me like hide, right? Because I do find it like so gross, but it's like another, I think, example of just like how women are treated, which I think that's the purpose it serves. But I think it's foul, like, and that's you almost don't want it there. But I think it is like that horrible truth of the world that they're kind of showing there.
I just don't know if I needed that to get that point across. Like, I think I would have walked away with that without that scene with Miggs.
Yeah. No,
I think that's fair.
That's also, it's probably set up to make us like Hannibal again, because you're like, you kind of want that guy to die.
Okay.
So like, and Hannibal basically kills him.
And
that makes sense to me.
I also think it shows like how, for lack of a better word, like how smart he is. Like, that he's literally able, with his words, able to manipulate someone to self-harm.
Swallow their own tongue, whatever that means. Like,
I think it does help characterize him, but did it need to be this man ejaculating on her to get us there? Not necessarily.
Right.
So I can understand.
No, I will respect anyone's complaint about it, but some of them I'm gonna be like, well, maybe this is why. But I understand. It is, violence against women is hard, and I think if you were to say I can't watch this because I don't like seeing violence against women, that is a completely
that is very valid
reason. But it is,
And I almost tough. Wish that I talked to you before we picked a book or movie, since I had seen this. I really should have been like, oh, were there any, like, as much as it's on both of us to, like, research content warnings, I knew, and I didn't think to have that conversation. Because I could have been like, we don't have to do this one.
No, I feel like it, like, comes with the territory of, A, we're reading a novel, and anything can happen in a set of 300 pages, and B, it's horror. So I think if you're going to be on a platform like this, it kind of comes with the territory.
Kind of interesting to think, though. A lot of slashers are very much about violence against women, but it's in a almost more tame way, almost. Like, in those, it is just, like, disgusting, brutal violence of, you know, like, someone getting chopped up. Where this, it's, I think, much more, like, psychological, which is worse, in my opinion. But I'm not a woman, so I don't...
For me, when I watch a movie, there's a big difference for me against just, like, murdering a woman or sexually assaulting a woman. I don't, like... A lot of times I will not be that fazed if someone gets murdered and it's not, like, saw gore. Don't like that. But, like, just, you know, someone dying, whatever. But I don't like sexual assault in film. I will look away. But
you think that there can be a purpose for it. Like, you're not saying we shouldn't show sexual assault. Okay.
That I don't, like, I can see a purpose of it in certain things, but I think there are a lot of films where it is gratuitous. And
I agree with
I don't want to watch it.
I don't think this is one of them, though, to be honest. But, again, I'm the man in the room, so I don't know.
Yeah, which I appreciate you saying that, because I think that is important to acknowledge that that's not the same experience that you're having.
And this movie is very much fully about, like I said, women in man's world, so. Cool. What else? What else you got that we can talk about? I like hearing what you have. As the hater in the room.
Those were kind of the big ones, right? Like, I talked about the intro. I talked about my personal, like, dislike of watching gender violence. Something else that bothered me, if we're gonna loop back to, or if we can loop back to the transphobia, I feel like in the movie, in a way that did not take place in the text, Buffalo Bill is painted as, like, a caricature of a trans person, right? When there's, like, this scene of him dressing up in women's clothing and he's in front of the mirror and he tucks his genitalia, like, he's like dancing in this, like, bombastic way with these, like, clashing, vibrant clothes, and he almost looks like a cartoon. And then at the end, like, he stops and he, like, poses in front of the mirror as if he's, like, Jesus Christ on the crucifix. And it just feels very, like, it feels overblown for the sake of being overblown, and I don't know what that serves. It felt like
almost, I fully agree with you on this one. I don't know what you do instead of it, and it is a very famous scene. Well,
it feels like it's mocking his gender identity.
Yes. I think so.
Like, and there's plenty of ways to show him as, like, there's other ways of showing that he might, that's also, I'm confused by, like, you're saying he's not transgender, but then you included this scene, which is implying that
they're just trying to make him seem weird in this scene, which plays into the transphobia.
Anything else.
Yeah.
Like, he is weird. He's murdering people. This is not how we need to show that.
It's, I agree that scene is, like, a lot, and, like, not in a good way, but it also is one that I'm, like, a very memorable scene, and it's like kind of bad because I think when I think about this movie, that's a scene that, like, comes to mind. I think that they could have handled that much better, and that's like, maybe I do find this movie in a lot of ways to be, like, I wouldn't take anything out, but I think that could have I think that could be taken out or at least changed to make it less ridiculous.
Yeah, it feels like, and I get that they want to do more showing than telling, but I feel like there maybe could have been like a catalog of photos that they panned over or some version of interior monologue because, like you said, Hannah, like in the book, that scene is told from his perspective. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot tamer and it's honestly a lot more sympathetic. Mm-hmm. And I know that we don't want to paint him that way because he does these horrible things, but it is less mocking. Mm-hmm. And if we could have had something like that, I feel like that would have been an easier scene to watch.
Yes.
I think we also get enough of it with just he puts the lotion on, or she puts the lotion on the skin, like scenes. Like Buffalo Bill is a really, I want to say like a funny character. Like he's so over the top of this like villain that I just like think we got the introduction to who this person was and maybe didn't need that. So,
yeah.
Reasonable. Very valid criticism.
It's hard for me because I've always like thought, when I think about this movie, I think about a couple of like the Hannibal lines, and then I think about it puts the lotion in the basket. Like,
yeah. Put the lotion in the fucking basket.
Like I hear it in my head like very obnoxiously, and then I giggle, and it's hard to like have that, but then also have, again, the transphobia and then like putting that together. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Something I will say, too, that I don't like about the movie and the book is Lord, oh Lord, is it fatphobic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
That's a time period thing, I think, more than it is, because it's like...
They're talking about how she weighs like 10 pounds more than me, and she is
it's considered
overweight.
Was she a big old fat person? Like,
yeah, there's a literal line, is she a big old fat person?
I think it's funny because it's a man writing it, not actually understanding like women's sizes at all, which is funny. It almost meta commentary on the book because clearly, I mean, this man's very pro woman, but then like misses out on this man being whoever wrote it. Honestly, I don't remember.
Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah, you're completely correct. Like it's almost like comical how off they are on like what sizes of women are.
And I think, like you just mentioned, and we've said it, is, you know, part of the theming of this is very much about being a woman in a man's world. It's very like pro-woman. But when we think about the feminism in this, we have to consider that it is missing a lot. It is only really focusing on one shade or type of feminism. It is not inclusive to women who are not a white woman. It's not inclusive of people who are LGBTQ women or transgender women. And that is a problem. And I also, again, like, you can't be sitting here acting like you're gonna write this great feminist novel and then be extremely fatphobic to every female character besides our lead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it is to a T the 80s brand of feminism.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say this goes back to Grandpa's trying his best, you know, like.
But best isn't good.
No, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But
it was a step, I guess, at the time.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
I think what I struggle a lot with it when people say about the past that it was like it was the past.
No,
we didn't know. I don't think that's what you're saying at all. But I think maybe a more accurate phrase for that is that like people just didn't have the language tools to talk about gender, to talk about diverse body sizes, to talk about race, you know? And I think that is so evident here that there is just no common language about being trans or about being queer or about being different from the norm in any way. And yeah, reading it now in 2023, when we do have all these tools, it's just like a big swing and a miss.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the overweight thing again. It's all the men, though, that have the like very fatphobic language.
I mean, you didn't read the book, but Clarice herself
does
think about how they're overweight or large.
I was saying in the movie, she like is that you don't see that as much. It's more like the men who we are supposed to not really side with that are doing it. It's not surprising they're saying it. Would be, I guess, my argument to say maybe it's not, other than them clearly just not knowing like actual women's sizes.
I can understand, like, thinking that from seeing the movie, but reading her monologue about it.
Well, the movie's what I care about. So.
Yeah, I know. And this is a film podcast, but
Yes.
again, we did read the book for context, so worth
gotcha.
mentioning the difference there.
I want to get into themes. You ready?
Well, we're already talking
Cool.
about
Let's do
the
it.
gender analysis, so
I
you
have
go
so
for
many things
what
that
is
I wrote
working
down.
for you.
Oh, what is working? Okay.
Within
so
that analysis.
Let's just start like right from the beginning. This is I've said it like 5 times, but woman's in a man in a man's world. We've set up, and it's just immediately like all the men in this movie just stare at her like the whole time, and they very much like use the camera to show these men being like voyeurs. The elevator shot is, I think, one of the like greatest shots in a film I've ever seen. To be honest, like that's heavy-handed.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's incredible. Like it's this tiny little Jodie Foster with all these dudes, and she's looking up. Right, it's just her. Elevator's closing. Her eyes in the air. All of them standing around her. And it's just like that. The colors are perfect. Yeah, it just that shot. I think tells you everything you need to know about this movie, which is incredible. I think they immediately set it up that like they only used her to go see Lecter because they thought Lecter would be into her, right? Like that's what Jack does. So her father figure, her mentor in this, even like uses her. I mean, I think you're going through. There's so many. Did you notice the part when they go into the garage and she uses the jack to get it up, and they're like, oh, the guy, he doesn't really like manual labor. So it's like she doesn't have the strength, and they acknowledge that that's okay because she's got the brain of the movie, right? Compared to everyone else, her and Lecter, really. And I think that's a cool way to like set that up. Jack won't describe the crimes in front of her with the local police, and then she has to correct him, which was pretty badass.
Yeah, she says cops look at you to see how to act. It matters.
Yeah, and I think like that is really cool scene that they just, and like I said, I think the whole autopsy scene like plays into this as well with like showing her reaction. And really, this is a movie and a book about crimes against women where only men are the people looking into it. And it's like, that is how the world was for how many years, which is absurd. Like, you guys ever think that maybe you bring like a couple women in here to to solve crime against women, that they might have an idea about it? Like, not just like be belligerent around one of the dead bodies. Like it really like it. I don't know. I felt this movie speak to me in a lot of ways to be like, man, like, and this still is a problem. But I'm sorry, I can let you guys talk a little bit. I just had a lot of notes about it. So tell me what you're thinking.
I definitely agree with the analysis. You pointed out a lot of the notes that I took related to the movie. It's both in the movie and the book, but I think there's a lot with the, male gaze. And like watching and looking at women. For example, there's more in the book with Buffalo Bill using the night vision goggles of like going into the basement, turning the lights off, and just looking at the women. And obviously that happens in the movie where he watches Starling. I did think it was interesting, like in the book, women are very much dehumanized. They are referred to as like this one. And that is both by Bill, but also by some of the police. It's just kind of like, it's just another one. Like, it's not a person. It's just another dead body, but not even a body. It's just like an it. But it is also interesting how, like, the terminology Bill uses as well kind of dehumanizes some of the women. Like, he said...
He said it puts the lotion on the skin?
Yes, and in part of the narration in the book, it's the material is laying on her side. She's not a person. She's just a material. Like, she's just a means to an end. There's also a section in the book, and I don't know if this is in the movie at all, but she kind of says, Clarice says in her narration that she's, like, not looking Jack in the eye to make it easier for him to communicate with her. Lots of shit like that. It's pretty on the nose.
I will say, though, and I think a big part of this is that it's like, she's the one that solves the case in the end, right? Like, she's the one that takes Bill down using everything like she's learned throughout. And I think that is like very awesome that it did take a woman to solve this case. Obviously still with help from Lecter, but like, they wouldn't have caught him without her. And I do find, at least to some degree, this movie, there's a handshake between her and Jack at the end that they like really focus on, that's like trying to say, at least in my eyes, that it's like she is the equal now. Whether when she really did become an equal in this world, because it's still very difficult, obviously. I don't know. But I think that that's what the film is trying to say at the end, right? Do you know what I'm talking about, the handshake?
Yeah. I struggled with that a little bit, and I fully accept that I might be reading too far into this one. But I struggled with that a little bit because it felt like she had to go to great extents that none of the men did. Like, she had to overcome death in the face, right? To just be considered an equal. And did anybody else have to do that?
You're entirely correct, because that's what women have to do in this world.
Right.
No,
like,
I think that fully plays into that narrative.
But then, is she really an equal? I don't know. I don't think so.
That's a greater debate, right?
Like, if you have to do all that to be considered worthy, what's going to happen the next day? Like, I don't think they consider her worthy.
No,
I agree.
That's such a fantastic point. But I really do believe that that's like, that feels purposeful, right? This is what women have to do to get on equal footing. And that's not a good thing. But I in my opinion, I think that's purposeful. Hannah, you got a thought?
I agree. I think it's purposeful.
No, that gets me excited. That makes me think, I'm like, this movie is genius when you say something like that. For me, at least.
I mean, it's clever. Absolutely, it's a clever movie. Highly nuanced.
Anything else we want to say about the gender analysis in this one?
Yeah, Liv, you got anything? Or
no, I don't think so.
I had to go on my rant a little bit because I get so excited about like themes in movies, especially when I feel that the movie functions in such a way that it just like really helps all of these themes and like really like pushes them to the forefront. I think that's really cool. And I think you cover that too with the way that the shots between her and Lecter. But do you want to do favorite scenes?
I'm not done with my analysis, dog. That's not the only theme that I really thought about. I also see a lot of like class discussion too. I mean, in the first time she meets with Lecter, he says that she looks like a rube with her cheap shoes. And I was like, what the fuck is a rube?
No, hold up. Good bag and cheap shoes.
Okay. But I was like, what the fuck is a rube?
I also did not know.
I just looked it up, and dictionary.com says, a country bumpkin. So, but I could tell with the cheap shoes and like the
we didn't
context
even talk about
anyway.
That monologue.
It's a great monologue. He's killing it. But essentially, like, there's a lot throughout this. And I think it is pretty evident in both the film and the book where she's trying to appeal to, like, a different class of people that's not just where she's from. Like, she is clearly from, like, she is poor. And she's trying to, like, fit into a group of people that are not from the same background. And Lecter calls her out on it right away. But I think the novel also kind of shows us that that's not really something to be ashamed of, because she is able to use that background to solve things throughout the case. Like, she knows how to talk to people who are more, like, on her, like, class level. And she also was like, well, I know this about women from, like, this area. So, you know, it is something that she is able to use. And we can see too, like, how that continues to impact her and her way of thinking about things too, in that in the book, she's accused of stealing something, but I think there's, like, a lot of heightened anxiety over that because she grew up poor. So, like, that accusation is much different for someone who grew up poor without resources versus someone who's rich who, like, steals from the poor all the time. So I do think there's a lot of that, which I enjoyed. Another
one is the fact that the case really only gets solved because a senator's daughter gets kidnapped, right? Pushing, like, special treatment for certain victims that have more money. Things get pushed forward. Hannibal gets offered deals that, I mean, he doesn't really help, but it, like, pushes things faster because of that. And that pulls in. That monologue, though, I fully agree with you on that. And I think that sets everything up as well. It's both the class part and the, like, woman part. Is that, like, they talk about her, she's got to get out, get anywhere, all the way to the FBI, which plays into what both of you said about the FBI. And she has to do all of that work to get to where she wants to be and to get on that equal footing. Did you have anything to add to that? Or any thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I was thinking the same thing around, like, the senator's daughter, right? Like, of course she's going to be the one who gets saved.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was about it.
Did you have anyone else have any other like thematic analysis or something we think this movie's trying to do that we didn't talk about?
I think I word vomited what I thought.
Nice.
So I was happy. All my little points, I get too excited. But I think we like covered it.
I think we can do favorite scenes then.
Yeah, and I'm glad we did it after because I think I'm going to say 2. I'm sorry. And I think one of them is my favorite thematic scene is the autopsy. I think that I mean horrible. It makes maybe makes my skin
It's really
crawl,
uncomfortable.
But that plays into everything thematically this movie's trying to say about women, which is like she's the one figuring this out. She's seeing the things that no one else is seeing. But she has to come face to face with this like violence against women. And it's like terrible, right? And it makes sense though that it's her, and they kick all the other men out of the room that are being dumbasses around there. And like it's clear that they, like you said before, they don't see this body as a person, but she does. And I think that's awesome. It's a really good scene. And the second one, I'm sorry, I have to say that the bait and switch at the end is ludicrous. With like them going to the house and it being the wrong house, and it's like they're showing them ring the doorbell, and they cut to Bill in the basement hearing the ring, but it's not actually the same place. Like absolutely bonkers filmmaking. Like,
I wish I could put myself in the headspace of seeing that. Like
Yeah.
for the first time.
Yeah.
When I saw that and when I saw Lecter in the ambulance, I literally screamed, "Fuck you!"
It's awesome filmmaking. Like
Yeah.
it's so the ones my thematic brain loves, the other one is that my filmmaking brain loves. So yeah.
You know what? Screw it. I'll give 2 as well.
Oh, sorry. It's that good of a movie.
And both mine have to do with Lecter because Anthony Hopkins is like a scene sealer, in my opinion. I love their intro scene. I just think it's really well done. I really like the conversation. And
Yeah,
it
cliche.
is it is cliche, but it is
No.
very similar to the book too. I just think that scene is really well written in both the book and the film. And I think it's also a lot of the factors that we already talked about when it comes to the lighting, the way it's shot, and just the performance. Like, oh, he's so good. I also do really like his like escape sequence, and it's partially because I actually graduated from college in that building, so that was filmed, so I just think it's kind of funny, but also I just think that scene is really thrilling, and it just shows how fucking smart and devious this man is, and like he is literally a serial killer, and I was still like, good for him.
Yep. You're also making me
Great work,
realize
sir.
I could just name so many things. This is my favorite scene in this movie. And I just do think this movie really tickles my brain. I like it a lot.
What about you?
The bait and switch at the end, specifically the ambulance, because I knew that there was going to be like some twist, right? Because of course there is, but just like seeing him in the ambulance, literally like.
You're like, sir.
I was like gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm talking about the house. And I'm forgetting that there's that scene that's also like an insane switch on you. There are 2 like really good twists in this movie that like they get you. You're too focused in the weeds of the case, and they hit you with those. Incredible. Okay. Anything else? We want to get to ratings.
Yeah.
Final ratings.
Let's do it.
So, I mean, do you want to go first? You can rate it however you want. It could be on if you liked it in movies, or you can rate it on a horror movie scale since you don't like them. So we go out of 10 though. So whatever you want to say. Ratings are dumb. I say that every time. So
Okay, I don't really have like a horror scale because I don't watch it.
Okay.
So I'll just do 1 to 10. Film, I would say, is a 5,
whew.
which I know.
5 for 5 Oscars.
That's what you said, sure. I was compelled, okay? Like, I sat down, I watched the whole thing. I wasn't counting down the seconds until it was over. But it was not enjoyable for me. I think viewing it as a woman, it was not enjoyable for me to sit down and watch violence against women and, like, be sitting there through this, like, ticking clock waiting for another girl to die. Like, that just, it didn't do anything for me except make me remember how much I hate going outside.
That's, I mean, very successful horror movie then, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Sure. book, similarly on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give that like a 2. Like, it was just dry. And again, maybe I would feel much differently about it if I hadn't watched the movie first. But because I watched the movie first and I knew the plot, and the book was just plot with very little else, it was just, okay, like I was ready to move on.
I definitely understand what you're saying with like your 5 out of 10. For Texas Chainsaw, I was like, this movie's just not for me. I did not enjoy myself. So like in that regard, it's a 4, but like for a piece of filmmaking, I'm going to give it like an 8 because like it's a good piece of film, but it's not for me. So I totally understand what you're saying because I have felt the same way about movies we've covered.
You don't feel bad about your 5.
Yeah, so don't.
I don't feel bad about my 5, but I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, because
you are welcome to have
same.
that feeling. We'll just have the commenters. Our commenters can hate you.
That's fine. I want all the smoke.
Yeah, find her. What's the Instagram again? So they can come
no
to
double
you.
underscore self-control.
Get her. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm really interested to see how you like write up your book review. Are you going to post that like at the time that we're releasing the episode?
Yeah, I think so.
Love that. I'm excited to see specifically. I mean, obviously we have this conversation, but like specifically what you write up because, oh boy, I don't know what to give this either. Because book wise, I just like did not enjoy myself, and I really, really struggle to give books below like a 3.5. Like I feel like this immense guilt. For some reason, like a movie, I can do that and I don't care. But for some reason, for a book, I'm just like, I'm insulting this one guy or gal who puts so much heart into writing this. Like, I feel like shit.
I mean,
but it's like
the book has
good.
already done what the book will do.
Like, true.
Do it. You know me. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
I'm mean. So.
No, but like my story graph, like my average rating is like a 4 because I'm shit. Like I can't do it.
All right.
You're not ruining anyone's profits here.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it like a 2.5 out of 5 because that's how I rate books. It's just like the story itself is interesting, but it's just written so fucking bland. And there's like, I don't think the character growth, like I feel like the characters are pretty flat besides maybe Lecter. Yeah, so, but when it comes to the movie is where I'm really struggling because I think there's a lot that make it a good movie, but like we said, I think what it's saying about gender is kind of like it's interesting, but again, it's not capturing all forms of womanhood, which a lot of things don't, but I think it specifically is very anti certain forms of womanhood, which means it's not that successful. And the transphobia is just kind of hard to get past. But it's also like it is a good movie. So, Matt, give me your movie score first. I'm still processing.
Oh, easy. It's 9 out of 10 for me.
Wow.
I think this is one of the best horror movies made ever. I think it deserves the Oscars that it got. I do think it has problems. That's why I'm going to knock a star off. But like in terms of my enjoyment, like I wrote my review for Twitter was one word: exhilarating. So that is how I feel. I think this is just such a good ride, and I have a lot of fun. It makes me feel things like that. That whole basement scene is tense. The night vision, that shit's scary. So, good movie.
If I'm going to think about it just from like what it's doing successfully as a film and kind of ignore the transphobia, which is, I know, not good, but if I'm going to ignore that, I'm going to give it an 8. I think it is a really good film, and I think in my younger years, I would have been like, yeah, it's a fucking great movie, and it's only now that I'm mature enough and have the language to like really analyze the problems with it that I feel that way. So I don't know.
I'm definitely choosing to ignore the problems because
like,
I like
you can't
the movie.
do.
No,
but like you.
Yeah, it's a very complex thing because it's like the separating the art from the artist in some ways. Although I do know that the art is a problem.
Yeah,
it is still like so effective at what it does that I just like really enjoy it. But I can at least, I'm smart enough to acknowledge like I can look at it and go, this movie doesn't make me think trans people are violent. You know. Like, that's the thing. And there are other people out there that maybe they do. Maybe they're not. They are using this movie to justify their, like, bigoted beliefs. But I'm not, so I can like the movie, you know?
You know, fair enough. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for this week.
That's a funny way. That's a good way to put it, I think.
Yeah, I get
I
it.
made myself laugh. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Plug
Thank you
yourself
for
again.
having me. My name is Olivia. I run the Instagram account No Shelf Control. That's no_shelf control.
And tell us again what you do there.
I review books and I make meals that are aligned with those books. I'm going to be really honest. I don't think I'm doing that for this one.
It's just
Oh my
What
God.
feels
You
wrong.
have to
Well,
make
you know what kind of
beans with
fava beans and liver.
Yeah.
Fava beans and liver.
Woo!
All right.
Okay.
Well, show this movie to your students. I think they could. There's some good literary analysis in there.
No,
So,
I will not.
all right. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Hanna.
I'm Hannah.
We're getting out of here.
Thank you for tuning into Horror Hour with the Hannahs. Make sure to listen to future episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and follow for additional content on TikTok or Instagram at Horror Hour with the Hannahs. If you like the podcast, please leave a positive review on your favorite podcasting app. Happy hauntings!